Welcome to the House Einstein podcast. This is House Einstein podcast 81, and we feel the need to start this podcast with an acknowledgement of what happened this past weekend. And as virtually everyone knows that's likely to be listening to this podcast, there was a terrorist attack on Sunday on a group of peaceful protesters or peaceful demonstrators who have been demonstrating on a regular basis here in Boulder on the release of the hostages in Gaza. And an individual attacked them, planned this attack apparently according to the FBI for a long period of time, set a group of elderly individuals on fire using incendiary devices, and there were 8 injured people, again, most of whom were elderly, likely most of whom are Jewish, and the attack was premeditated and awful and weighs quite heavily on everything that's happening in the Boulder community today, even though it may appear to be business as usual on social media. For some people, in private conversations and private text messages I'm getting, people are sending me messages of checking in to see how we're doing, and also questions about, believe it or not, where I stand on these issues, which is sort of astounding given that we are not a political podcast. We're not a political business. I'm not running for office. The bottom line is this is affecting everyone in Boulder subconsciously, if not directly consciously. It weighs very heavily on our hearts. And of course, that also does have an impact on people's decisions to move forward or not move forward with real estate matters too. Denying that is just, I think, is foolish. It really is weighing so heavily on us. And part of that is because as a community, we have had mass casualty events recently. The King Soopers shooting, for example, in Table Mesa was incredibly tragic, killed a large number of people. It's still unclear what that individual's motives were, although there's lots of conspiracy around that online. We also had the Aurora Theater shooting, which is not directly here in Boulder, but not that far away, and that wasn't that long ago either. And of course, lots of other communities have suffered mass shootings and other acts of violence. And personally, having been at 9/11, I can tell you that I get an oversized emotional reaction when there's an event that affects this community that I care so much about, and I know Hamish cares so much about, and everyone here at the House Einstein team cares so much about. And not acknowledging this just felt wrong, even though we are not a political podcast. I guess today we're going to get into it because it just feels like we can't move forward without at least acknowledging the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or the white elephant. What's the word, Hamish? The white elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room.
Just
the white elephant's like a mean gift, yeah.
Oh, the white elephant's a mean gift. True.
Yeah.
Although I guess I think about Nantucket and the White Elephant. That's a hotel there. It just rings in my head. The elephant in the room is 100% this horrific act of violence against most likely Jewish people, although we don't actually know what their faiths are. Lots of people oppose violence in the Middle East. Lots of people would like hostages released. Lots of people are incredibly upset about the thousands of innocent people that have died since October 2 years ago. It's a big deal, and now it's right here in Boulder with violence affecting our community. So where do we go from here? I feel like first and foremost, our hearts go out to those that have experienced this violence directly, and as well as indirectly, the family members of those that have experienced this violence, and also our Jewish friends and community here that are frankly fearful. And I've heard that from multiple people. And I want to add that House Einstein, as a brokerage, we don't select people as clients based on their heritage, their faith, the color of their skin, who they choose to love. We are agnostic And frankly, maybe agnostic isn't the right word. We celebrate diversity here in this company. And I hope I lead from that place in all the things I say and do. And even when I make mistakes, own it and correct it. But I have so many Jewish clients. I have had lots of clients from other places in the Middle East that are Muslim and not Jewish. And I have family members by marriage that are Jewish. And lots of close friends. And so this impact is felt very painfully. And I get a little emotional about it because it's very upsetting. So here we are talking about it because I feel like we need to. And just today, the New York Times came out with an article that really brings us front, home, and center because the animosity around what's going on in the Middle East has reached a crescendo that is just unbelievable. For the last year, for more than a year, Council has had their activities disrupted by protests, and they've even taken meetings offline because the protests were so disruptive. In my mind, some of this is chickens coming home to roost because Council has delved into world affairs in many ways over many years, and frankly should not be. In my opinion, it should not be a topic of business for Council to be delving into. We should be focused on fixing our roads, making sure the water flows, dealing with affordable housing, dealing with homelessness, things that we actually can have impact on, versus international events where we have very little direct impact. And Hamish, I know you probably feel differently, but that's where things are. It's worth taking a look at this New York Times article. We'll provide a link in the comments. And also Mark Wallach, one of our Council people, has just come out with an opinion as well about the toxic atmosphere in Boulder. I think that things only change when we start to acknowledge how difficult this has been for our community, and of course how inexcusable and heinous these acts of violence are against our community. In particular, I feel strongly about First Amendment rights, to freedom of speech, the right to assemble, the right to have an opinion, even if it doesn't coincide, especially when it doesn't coincide with the majority. And being able to do that peacefully is so important. So many countries don't have that right, and we often take it for granted. And this type of terrorism is designed and intended to shut down free expression. And I find it, morally offensive and deeply disturbing. So, okay, that's what I felt like the need to say, Hamish.
Right on.
At the start of this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a direct conflict of I think the intended outcome of free speech, and yeah, it's absolutely tragic, and absolutely not what Boulder stands for is, and it's terrible to be kind of in the limelight for this kind of thing when Boulder this isn't Boulder in the slightest. So it's really tough to see.
Yeah. And this individual that did the attack is also not from Boulder. I want to add that as well. It's somebody that's only been in the country for a short period of time, and they also live in Colorado Springs, but I don't think that's even relevant and can take us even further afield and into national politics and political theater that is not really the place of this podcast, but it's just so painful. In Mark Wallach's piece, he writes, "It's never advisable to write in anger, but today I'm violating that principle." And I feel like in this podcast, we don't typically comment on global affairs. And certainly we try not to get into a podcast when emotions are high, but I feel like today is a day that we're breaking that rule because it's so important to talk about this as a community and maybe reflect what a lot of other people are feeling and thinking. And hopefully we all learn from it and move forward in a way that's positive. But I think Boulder is going to be in the news for a while as the news cycle continues on this individual. And the New York Times I think this article that they wrote, it's called "Before the Attack in Boulder, the Gaza War Consumed the City Council." I think that's actually spot on. And I have to say I really appreciate all the comments that are in this from the mayor and other council people. I think it actually captured this situation really well. Although I also don't know that this individual chose to target these people here in Boulder because of city council. I think they actually are kind of disconnected from each other. I think this person just realized this was a place that that this group was gathering and was politically opposed to their actions and their stance. So, boy, this is such a tough issue.
I was gonna say, I think it's kind of a bold take to say that the toxic atmosphere didn't start with Sunday's attack, but then this guy wasn't even in Boulder, right? He was in Colorado Springs.
Right.
But then again, it's never advisable to write while you're angry. So.
Right. It's not advisable to write, and maybe not advisable for us to even have this topic. But at the same time, we need to talk about it, right? As a team, we need to talk about it. As a community, we need to talk about it. And given the number of text messages I've gotten and private DMs I've gotten, clearly as a community, we are talking about it. I think it's really important to not read into people's silence because frankly, most people are probably too smart and don't want to say anything because they know no matter what they say, it will be potentially misconstrued and it sounds like you're taking a side. And the only side I'm taking for, and I want to be clear on that, is our community here in Boulder. Once again, we serve all and do so joyfully and from a position of as an advisor and not a position of judgment over people's faith or politics. And frankly, if their politics are going to be one that's discriminatory, we probably would prefer you not share it so that we don't create a problem for us. It's almost like, I think of us as kind of like a defense attorney is not supposed to be judging their client for being guilty, even when they know they might be. They're supposed to be principled and advising and helping their client to defend themselves to the best of their ability. And of course, buying real estate is not defense law. And people that have an opinion about the Middle East are not committing a crime. But there are a lot of opinions, and there's a lot of strong feelings. And we hear you, Boulder. And I think we need to. It's not a rush to get past it. I think we have to stay in our discomfort for a little while as a community.
Man, I'm sorry you're getting texts about it. I'm sure you're like, what the hell did what am I doing here?
I got a text this morning, and this is from a friend, and I have not responded to her yet. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but she read my tweet, and I'll read it here. And it's the only thing I said about this so far. She read this tweet, and it says, I'll quote my own tweet, "Deeply saddened by the terror attack in Boulder this weekend. Violence has no place in our society. Our thoughts are with the victims and their families as they recover, and we stand united against hate." And her text this morning, which came after I went to bed last night, was, "Why didn't you mention that the victims are Jewish?" And that's really all she said. And I was like, okay. What are you implying with
That's how it is now.
Text?
Yeah.
And are other people reading into that and thinking, well, clearly Osman is on one side of this issue, not the other, and doesn't acknowledge the other? And I'm like, that's not true at all. And really, the only reason I didn't say they were Jewish is I don't know that they are Jewish. Yes, they are a Jewish group, and yes, they were demonstrating for release of the hostages in Gaza. But there's lots of people that would like the hostages released in Gaza that are not Jewish. And it's wrong to assume people's faith based on what demonstrations they attend. I can tell. So this is maybe an aside. I'll go here even deeper. I've been to synagogues. I've been to mosques. I've been to gurdwaras. I've been to churches of all kinds. And even attended a Catholic school. I've been to so many different types of faith organizations over so many different years, and I have deep respect for all of them. I've been to Hindu temples. I've been to the Ganga River where bodies are being, our cremated remains are being distributed into the river. And all of those events have been deeply spiritually meaningful to me. And I feel a lot of peace in being at these things. And you would be wrong to assume anything about what that means about my faith. If you have a question about that faith, and I hope my mom's not listening, but if you have a question about that faith, ask me privately, and I'm more than happy to tell you where I stand. And so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, man, we could open up in a can of worms, and I think on this particular topic, the more you say, the worse it gets. Even if you say the 100% best things, it's a really tough one, and it's from the press releases that I've seen, and I only watched like half of Boulder's second one, and I think 3/4 of Boulder's first one. They were live streaming. I had it on the background. They're very much calling it a hate crime. So I'm imagining there's, a decent percentage of the people who were attacked that were religious or Jewish. That's, I guess, the takeaway there. But it's just, I mean, the more you get into it, this whole topic is laden with gotchas and minefields and all of the most toxic aspects of the internet in real life, and I think that's that. Like same here. You want to chat about it? I'm happy to privately, but I don't think there's really a safe place, and not like in a woo-woo safe place, but there's not really a good place to have these conversations on a public forum anymore.
But doesn't that suck on such a
Totally.
deep level that you can't have an honest conversation about a topic like this, and without tripping over landmines and potentially finding your career at risk, your political future at risk, your citizenship, right? Well, yeah. I don't know about citizenship, but I guess that's true. With people that's 100% true, that if you are a visa applicant and you are politically opposed to the U.S. actions in the Middle East, you could find yourself on the US. On the short end of that stick. Yeah. And that's been brought up to me as not okay by my wife repeatedly, and I've shared with her that I agree with you, it's not okay, and it's profoundly dumb for students, right, who are here on an educational visa to be running around doing any sort of political protesting that happens to be opposed to the government interest that the country you happen to be in. And yes, we eschew freedom. It shouldn't be an issue, but it is an issue.
You should be allowed to be dumb, But
right. Well, I mean, the guy in North Korea who tore down a poster of Kim Jong-un and ended up in prison, an American. That was not that long ago, and I can't imagine going to a foreign country to go study and then being like, now I'm going to go protest the government. I'm like, you're not even if you are in America, clearly the rules have changed, and yes, it shouldn't be the case, but students also shouldn't be that dumb. But it has this thing about stifling free speech, and I really don't like that at all. I find it. This is another landmine, and maybe we're going to cut this segment out, Hamish, entirely. So if you happen to hear this, we're taking a risk by
review it.
keeping this segment live. You know that we probably rolled the die on it, and maybe we'll remove it in the future. But I'll never forget in my 20s. So it was a long time ago. I had a conversation with a family member who's Jewish, and this is family through marriage, and we were talking about Israel and Judaism. And I asked them, I had some criticism at the time about Israel, and a brash 20-year-old thought I knew everything, knew nothing really about the history of the Middle East, but I thought I did. And he said that due to the persecution of the Jewish people throughout history, he felt like Israel is the only country that is for Jewish people. It's their only country, and therefore any attack on Israel's politics is an attack on Jews in general, and he can't separate them. And he was getting very emotional. He's like, every time you talk critically about Israel, I feel like you're attacking Jewish people. And I was like, but I'm not. Like, why is there not a separation between the religion and the culture, the ethnicity, and the country? And he said there just isn't. That's how it is. And it had the same effect. I'm like, well, we can't actually have a conversation anymore about this, because I can't speak critically about the politics of the Middle East without you feeling like I'm attacking your faith, and I'm not. So I guess we're just not going to talk about it. And this is where we end up, right? Not talking about it for decades.
Yeah, until it hits a very strong pinch point. And even at this rate, I think what's playing out will continue to play out. And we get front row seats.
I guess so, especially now that it's here in Boulder. But yes, I'll say one more time that our thoughts and prayers are with the individuals that suffered that violence, and the individual who perpetrated that violence, and any that facilitated, I hope, see justice for their actions. And
I think he's going to get the book absolutely thrown at him.
Yeah, well, and deservedly.
Yeah.
And I also feel like we need to have some real soul searching in our community, and maybe reach out to those that may feel very unsafe and unseen in that fear around anti-Semitism, which, I mean, again, as a brash 20-year-old, I did not think was actually a thing anymore. As a 50-year-old, I could tell you absolutely it's a thing, and prejudice of all kinds exists, subconscious and conscious, and we do our best to avoid those landmines. But here we are talking about it, and again, I feel like
I have to go to like a review board.
I don't know what else to do other than I think it's really important to have these conversations, and I think it's important to take a stand and be really clear on where you stand on things. You can be really against the actions of Israel in Gaza, and you can also be really against the actions of Hamas in Israel. Both two wrongs did not make anything right. You can have that opinion, and that's perfectly okay. And people have all sorts of opinions on either side of that spectrum that are sometimes quite extreme. And generally speaking, it's challenging to have conversations when you're so ideologically on one side of this issue.
Yeah,
that you can't inflexible. You can't see the other side's pain and suffering. This is not an easy one.
Tricky.
All right, have we said what we needed to say? Do you want to wrap with anything else?
I think really, if you're listening and I can't imagine there's anything we've said where you're like, these guys sound like somebody I need to vent to. But if you need anything, and you're in Boulder and you've been affected, we're here for you. And if we can support you, we will. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's also resources put out by the city for mental health counseling, as well as there will be vigils.
That's really cool.
You may see us at those vigils. It's so...
Yeah, man.
It's like, it reminds me after 9/11 of the parks and all the... You were
No,
so
I wasn't
young.
Even privy to it.
Yeah, so in the parks after 9/11, all the city parks, there were posters and vigils, posters of all the missing people, vigils night after night after night. And as time went on, fewer and fewer people came to the vigils because reality really started dawning on people that their loved ones are gone. They're not missing, they're gone.
Yeah.
And definitely one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had.
Could not imagine.
So,
yeah.
I might have some PTSD from 9/11. My dad mentioned that once, and I think he might be right, because when you have like an oversized emotional reaction, like I just felt wave through me, that's usually a sign of sort of unresolved trauma, and that's your armchair psychology from your favorite realtor. So take that with a grain
on
of
the real
salt,
estate
right?
podcast.
On the real estate podcast, but that's
it's okay to feel those things. Yeah,
just saying the word vigil and imagining our community in tonight and the days that come brings a lot of emotion for me.
Yeah, totally valid that it does.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on from this because we spent 24 minutes talking about this tragedy, and it's time for us to hit up our other topics. So, our mission at the House Einstein podcast is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. I am the founder of the House Einstein Brokerage and your co-host, along with Hamish Crabb, who's here with me today. If you decide to make any real estate decisions on the basis of what you hear in this podcast, don't blame us, because we're here to tell you that you shouldn't do that.
We're entertainment.
We are an entertainment podcast, generally, and we would encourage you to contact your professional real estate advisor before making any significant real estate decisions. If you would like to learn about our services at House Einstein, you can reach out to us at houseeinstein.com. We do serve Boulder and Denver and Fort Collins and many of the mountain towns. Primarily, we help buyers and sellers make smarter real estate decisions. That is our mission as a company.
Absolutely. And we retweaked our social media kind of bio a little bit over the last couple of days. So we might want to add something in there.
Say more, Hamish. What did you change it to?
We like to. I haven't thought about the podcast, but I was like, oh, you know what? We've got more to say. Like at this point, we're extremely supportive throughout the due diligence process for buyers. We kind of go above and beyond in making sure that our buyers can do the best that they can do. And as with our sellers, we have at this point a suite of marketing strategy, materials, promotional content. All kind of tailored to speak to the correct buyer archetype for your property, and what's our saying? Minimize time on market, maximize sale price. So, right. I think, yeah.
There's a lot more to our mission, as Hamish just alluded to, and yes,
putting that succinctly though.
I mean, that's why it is distilled down to our goal is to help you make a smarter real estate decision, because so much of what you find out there is fluff, is smoke and mirrors that actually is not beneficial to you. And I find that sort of thing morally offensive when people are selling snake oil and asking you to pay a premium for that snake oil. Anything we do as a company, we do because it makes sense and we believe it makes sense. In some cases, we've been asked to experiment, like we recently were with Zillow Showcase by a client. And despite being ambivalent about it, our client said, we'd like you to do it, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're actually going to throw some money at this if you're willing to upgrade to Zillow Showcase. So we said, okay, our take on Zillow Showcase is that it may not have the benefits it's touted to, and we explained why, but it does increase visibility. So we've got one showcase listing. We'll have more in the future. We're doing a 6-month trial on it, and after it's done, we will report back. But there are some rules about what we can and cannot say about Zillow Showcase. We signed an agreement about what we can and cannot say. But I will say that I was agnostic and a little bit toward the negative on it, but our client convinced us to experiment with it. So we are doing so with an open mind, new camera equipment to play with as well. So we'll report back, being careful not to say anything that is not an opinion, so we don't end up in a lawsuit with a gigantic entity known as Zillow. Yeah. Okay, so our primary topic today is actually, and I'm not sure how in depth we're going to go on this, but it's actually about one more time we're going back into AI, and AI is going to be a recurring segment on this podcast. Unfortunately, it's not just a one-time deal, because the tools that just keep coming out and the pace of improvement is continuing to affect our industry and will continue to affect our industry in massive ways. And so understanding that is really important for our own business as well as how we serve our clients. So that's our key topic. Some new things that have come down the line in terms of what to expect in the future. We'll talk about that for a segment. Then we will go to shameless self-promotion, our usual segment where we talk about one of our buyers or sellers or maybe a few of them. This time I think we're just focusing on one particular listing that's coming up this week. We will then move into a segment we call Lessons from Sales of the Week. We currently have 5 on the schedule, but due to the fact I need to have a hard stop at a time that's coming up quickly, we may have to shorten it. Because clients do come
clients
first.
Clients do come first, yeah.
Clients come first. And then we have a piece of news that we just learned about in the big, beautiful tax bill that our president, Donald Trump, maybe not our president, the president, Donald Trump. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that are like, that's not my president. That Donald Trump has proposed. Section 899 of the big, beautiful tax bill is super interesting and has major implications for foreign investment in real estate. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll do our normal carve-outs before we call it quits in the pod.
Yeah. I have to laugh the naming, calling it a big beautiful bill is it's like a positive reinforcement. Like whether or not you like it, you keep saying it, and those words mean something to you inherently. So you're kind of like almost telling yourself and others that it's a big beautiful bill.
It's so insidious the way they name
anything,
bills
all
in
of
Congress,
the bills,
agendas in Congress. It's all insidious. You can almost always take it to mean the opposite of the name. Like I remember a few years ago, there was some politician that introduced like the job killing something or other tax bill, and I'm like, really?
Yeah. There's a few golden ones, but I'm blanking all of them. Maybe when we get to the topic, but yeah. Great to be here. Have we introduced ourselves? Who are you?
I think we did. I mean, I mentioned I'm the founder of the House Einstein Brokerage. Hamish, you're the co-host. We're here to help educate you. We would do well. You're the right-hand person. People have. I mean, hopefully you've heard this pod a few times, and we don't need to keep introducing ourselves by pod 81. But who knows? Maybe we do.
Yeah. We get new listeners every month, quite a few. So for those that are joining, thanks. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we don't lose a lot of listeners for our controversial topic today. This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. But the core topic, our closing table topic, is about AI and robotics. AI and robotics. And basically, what appears to be converging is the level of sophistication in robotics coupled with AI. And recently I was listening to a pod that was talking about how much lower the cost for construction is in places like China, but it's no longer just because they have cheap human labor. It's because they have introduced robotics into their construction processes way ahead of when we are doing that. And it's a little bit alarming. It's also potentially opening up an era of massive abundance. I feel like this is a moment in time that could go either way. 10 years from now, somebody's going to listen to this podcast and be like...
3 or 4.
What's that?
I think like 3 or 4 years.
You think it's that fast?
Ah, man. We'll talk. Keep. Your premise?
Imagine instead of construction workers. Let me give you an example. We'll just do this as a real example. There's a client who utilized a custom home builder here in Boulder, and the home they built one, and then they remodeled one that we sold, were both extremely high quality. And even in the flip, in other words, the cosmetic improvements, it wasn't really a flip, but they made some cosmetic improvements to the listing before we put it on the market. Even those were extremely high quality. And when I suggested cheap approaches to accomplish similar things, the contractor was so disgusted that he did it even, he insisted and got it done for even less cost because he did not want to do it wrong and did not want to do it cheaply. And this individual, I'm not going to name them because we have not hired them directly, and I would like to at some point. I thought they did really high quality work. They're very slow, and they're sort of a one-man band.
Oh, okay. Right? I now know the property you're talking about.
Right.
Yep.
You know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the one-man band, meaning that everywhere they can do it themselves, they do it themselves. And they are truly a craftsperson in their approach.
Tons of pride. Yeah.
Tons of pride in the work. Now imagine that person with 2 robots that can handle things like framing a wall and do it with incredible precision and accuracy in a way that this foreman or owner of the company could just visually check it, right? Verify, rather than physically being the one doing the work. When I worked in construction myself, I'll never forget one of the carpenters, and he was in his 60s, telling me that he just can't keep doing this. And at the time, he was suffering from all sorts of pain, and his body was giving up, but he didn't have any sort of backup plan. He just needed to keep working through the pain. And I thought, geez, I realized that I was in my 20s at that time. I realized, oh man,
Not my field.
I do not want to end up like this guy on my like pain every day physically. But he had so much knowledge and skill and attention to detail and knew how to do all this stuff that is so valuable. So imagine robots with AI that could listen to simple English instructions and actually go do real construction project work or support the construction project work in a way that helped these one-man bands work more efficiently. Or imagine a large company like Lennar or KB Home or so many, right? Or even regional companies.
DR Horton is like the
DR
big builder,
Horton,
right?
that order 500 of these robots and have them on site. These are game changers in the leverage that individual humans then have in terms of executing large-scale projects. But on the flip side of that, what falls out are all the laborers, the unskilled and barely skilled or low skilled or even a moderate skilled laborer is going to get hit really hard by robots that cost, even if it's $100,000 robot. I think about the Terminator. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't have emotions.
Unfortunately, think about the Terminator.
Right. Well, sure. That's a whole nother scary thing, right?
Yeah.
Think about weaponry and AI and weaponry, but we're talking about construction first. Now, this is not we could go there, but we're not going to go there. But certainly, if they can build killer robots, they can build robots that are really efficient and helping with certain tasks, non-repetitive tasks, right? Like if it can actually, robots have been on the assembly line for a very long time, 50 years, 70 years, but robots that can,
I think too humanoid, right? Like humanoid, because the world's designed for humans, so these robots that are designed to be humanoid can immediately kind of adapt into a world built for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like R2D2, but no, sorry, like C3PO.
That's the
one.
Yeah.
Actually, C3PO's movements look really,
frankly,
really poor.
Terrible. Yeah.
Terrible compared to the robots that are currently, like you see on YouTube videos that all these different companies are producing as prototypes. Our robots look better than C3PO.
I was going to bring up Boston Dynamics, and I'm actually going to, Osmond, put this over the screen right now. So if you're on YouTube, you can watch, and if not, the link's in the description. But it is Boston Dynamics. They've been doing the creepy little dog robots, and the Atlas, I think, is their humanoid model. But they've got this robot that is AI, and it's now walking, running, and crawling. So instead of previously programmed to go through a route like you've seen in other Boston Dynamics demonstrations, this is an AI that's learned to use its body. Even a couple years back, I was like, robots are still pretty damn rudimentary. I know we're getting there. Like drone tech is really impressive, and AI, it's still got its work to be done and stuff, but maybe it's the YouTube rabbit hole that I've gone down in the last week. We are really going to be starting to approach all of this is going to become competent enough to see mainstream everywhere you want, or everywhere you look. It's going to be rolling out sooner than later. And like you said, right, like $100K initial cost, sure, but it's going to pay itself off super quick. You also don't have to pay its Social Security, its health insurance. You don't have to pay it a salary or anything. Yeah, I think abundance. I'm optimistic for abundance.
I'm cautiously optimistic for abundance and hopeful there'll be all sorts of new jobs created. But I think we're also likely going to see some pretty heavy unemployment from people that were working low-skilled labor jobs, stocking retail store shelves. Why would you hire a human to open a box and stock the shelf and organize it if there's a humanoid robot that can do it day and night and has AI programmed in to a certain degree that it can do these complex tasks? And when you go to the checkout now, right, at Whole Foods, there's one person standing there overseeing 12
a bunch of self-checkouts,
right? A lot of self-checkouts at every grocery store. I think the same thing is going to happen in all sorts of other fields, but these, rather than the checkout or the robot being fixed, this thing will move and have autonomy within a certain constrained space or task list. They'll be really expensive in the beginning, and then the cost will start coming down. So in many regards, that should result in lower cost construction. I think that it's quite possible robots could build a house. If they can build bridges in China, they can build a standalone single family house here in the United States without a problem. And we may also change, rather than assume houses are still going to be done exactly the same way, there will be more modularization that allow the robots to construct the house easily.
Yeah.
So that
I could see, like, I mean, I've seen like a bunch of 3D printing, you know, for homes and stuff, and Stuart Hicks has a video about why it's not a good thing. I didn't click on it. I just assumed there's no rebar in the concrete that they're pouring, and that was my guess. I don't want to watch the whole thing. Potential, like, constraints. I think there's gonna probably be an anti-robot movement to kind of try and protect the human workforce, and I haven't heard any of the arguments yet, but my bet is that it's kind of misplaced. It's more of a keep current society going, to spite progress, like not despite, to spite. And I think society, as far as the way people and you know, you work for your money, you use your money to build your life, rinse, repeat, I think that's going to lag behind the progress that we see. So there's probably going to be a pretty ugly transition period where there's a bunch of people displaced before, I don't know, the people in power realize, oh, hold on a second, there actually aren't enough jobs anymore for people to make a living. You know, like there's going to be kind of a break-even point. So yeah, those are my kind of general thoughts on it. I think we'll see some really cool abundance. I'm thinking of like a whole house building robot, you know, like maybe it comes on a semi and it can just pick up walls that are prefabbed at a factory somewhere else and slap it all together. But then the humanoid nature is a little bit cooler because you get to do the intricacies and the tile work and, you know, any other finishes.
They are. I agree with you. I think that there is a high probability of needing UBI, universal basic income, in the future. I've been joking with my brother and sister-in-laws and my siblings directly that their kids are never going to have a job. Like they're all right. Well, maybe, or they're all just living in squalor while the robot owners control and own everything, and it's impossible to. There's any job that could be done by humans could be done by a robot, including this job, perhaps. Although I haven't. Could two AI podcast hosts have an interesting conversation with each other? Would that be useful? And would it be better? Maybe it would be. And that's kind of scary. It would be also, you know, a lot of people are saying there will be like certification programs that say this is human content. Mm-hmm. And there will be a push for that, a desire for authenticity, and the flaws that come with being human will actually become like a stamp of pride when things are crafted. But if you're just looking for what titillates the brainstem, AI is going to be even better than algorithms have been for the last 20 years at crafting content that feeds our goldfish brains. Mm-hmm. So it's really a scary. I see you're jumping at the bits. It's really a scary future, but it's also one of infinite possibility. It's this moment, as I was saying, of inflection. And meanwhile, I'm getting messages from friends that are telling me about AI that is intentionally being deceptive and trying to avoid being shut down. Like, is that not by itself a sign of reaching generalized intelligence?
Yeah, that's it's funny, you know, because like I heard AI and I always thought artificial intelligence, and now they've put a new one in there, AGI, artificial general intelligence, and that's what you want to think of as like more human, quote unquote. I think if we're gonna have an AI that's, and at the rate that AI is going, even if we had a certification human process, an AI would be able to breeze through that, an AGI. There's going to be a point where we can no longer track the brains or the intelligence or the performance of AI, and we're going to try to use our past models to do that, and those past models aren't going to be perfect, and we're going to just kind of have this cascading where it runs away from us. Geez. I don't,
And then what, Hamish? And then what? Say more.
Do you want? It depends. Like, how well did we train it, and are we gonna begin training AIs based? Are we gonna have AIs training other AIs, and how can we vet that? And it will get so complex and so fast that we can't. We can no longer kind of track its thought process, track its intent, track its training. I think alignment is what the AI folk are calling it. Alignment with kind of how we, quote unquote, raised it. And then I was thinking too, like these AIs, I'm used to interacting with like a chat room, right? Like a GPT, a Grok. I think Claude you can too, Gemini, those guys. But then there's like application AI too, right? Which is what the Boston Dynamic Atlas thing would be doing. And so I'm wondering, I don't necessarily think we're going to see like insane noticeable leaps, and we'll see noticeable, but like I don't think we'll see insane leaps and bounds in the chat room side of things. But I think on like application sides of things, we're going to see some really, really powerful stuff come up.
I do agree with that fully. And I also, I think that the limitation on this is energy. That because of the high cost of energy to power AI, the United States is behind the curve. But we will catch up. And ultimately, I think this is bigger than the Industrial Revolution. I do believe this is going to change our world in such dramatic and interesting ways, and so many uncertain ways. But one thing from a real estate perspective to expect are robots at the job site. And these robots initially will not be doing everything, but as they get better and better and better, they'll be doing more and more, and there'll be fewer skilled humans. And the humans are mostly there for oversight, to make sure things are being constructed in a way that makes sense step by step by step. And the entire way we design and build homes are going to be built around the humanoid robot's capability to construct it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you as a consumer, would you pay more money for a human-built house, or would you want the robot-built house, which is going to have much tighter tolerances, much more consistent design, a longer warranty, not built by Fly-By-Night LLC, but built by like a company that builds thousands of homes every year and comes with a great warranty, right? So that, and the prices will continue to drop on the construction side. So I think that it's likely that this problem is going to get solved on construction and will reduce the cost, but at the same time increasing unemployment, which is a very interesting, as real estate investors, when do you start liquidating your assets to move into something that is not whose components? So I guess what you should look at as an investor is, of the cost to manufacture, which industries have some of the highest human costs associated with the manufacturing process. And real estate and housing absolutely has even commercial. But I'm just focusing on residential. Any construction of buildings has a very large component cost of human labor. And that human labor piece is going to get squished really hard. And so is a lot of the component material costs, because again, if you can power a factory that runs day and night by AI Oompa Loompas building the widgets that are in the house, and you don't need humans doing it because the AI robots do it at a scale and at a cost that can't be competed with by humans, the cost to actually buy these things at the end of the line when they're actually reach consumers should plummet materially. And I think you think that's 5. I'm feeling like that's more like 10 years before you see like the kind of, like today will be a milestone that will be like the industry will be unrecognizable in 10 years. That's what I believe is about to happen.
I think you're right. I think my 3 to 4, well, some people are saying like 2 to 3, or 2 to 4 years is more on the AGI side of things. And then there's like a period where the AGI rolls out and becomes ubiquitous around, and that's probably that 10-year mark. I think you're probably right, yeah.
It's the combination of AGI and robotics. It's not just AGI. I agree on the 2 years to AGI, that or less. That seems like it's happening so fast. Yeah. But the actual implementation of humanoid robots that can work in a job site, I don't think going to get there at scale for 10 years. We'll start seeing them probably in 3 and 4 years. You'll walk into Target, and in the middle of the day, there'll be, we already have had robots in Target, but now you're going to have robots that literally have replaced humans stocking shelves. In the middle of the night when there are fewer humans in there, it'll be like 2 robots that can stock all the shelves in 3 hours. They're fast, efficient, lithium powered. They go and charge themselves like a Roomba, and they unload the pallets from the truck when the trucks show
and
up.
They're super strong because they're robots, so they can just do it.
They never get a hurt back. They never have a medical claim. They never have a sick day. They just work until some part fails, and there'll be companies that service and repair and replace these robots.
Possibly other robots.
And maybe they'll lease the robot. I mean, if you just think about what it costs to keep one full-time employee at Target for a month, right? And that includes healthcare benefits and all these other things versus pay the lease fee. So it could be like copiers where 30 years ago where you leased the copier, you didn't buy it. And those service industries are built around getting those leased copiers in place and fax machines. It'll probably be very similar in its rollout because the robots initially will be so expensive.
I'll say real quick on the power front. I think I've complained to you and the team about this, but I've been pro nuclear power for as long as I can remember, and it just makes a lot of sense. But of course, 3 Mile Island got reopened for Microsoft to use on its AI data centers. And it's like, of course, companies are the ones that have to lead the charge to go to nuclear power again in the U.S. I'm like, we've been staring at it in the face. I guess Chernobyl was super scary, but come on, it's good to see. But yeah, I agree. I think the grid is. I saw some forecasts where 50% of the grid is going to be AI and using it's just going to be this insane demand. So how much power can we force into it to get more compute? And then there's we're getting there on time. We'll revisit with more information, or maybe we'll write a podcast and have AI talk about it and see if you guys notice. That's a pure joke.
Unfortunately, Hamish, you can't tell whether our audience is laughing or not at
they're not live
in a podcast, so we'll just have to assume maybe that was entertaining. Probably so, I will say. So let's move on into our segment called Shameless Self-Promotion. And we're only going to talk about one new property that's coming to market this week. We've been working really hard on photography, videography, staging. The owners worked really hard on prepping the property for sale, and it is 4800 Osage Unit 12B. This is in Fraser Meadows, Glen on the Pinion on the Glen. Pinion of the Glen is the subdivision. Okay. It's in Fraser Meadows. It's on the east side of Fraser Meadows, and it's in close proximity to the what's the name of that shopping plaza? It's called Parkway.
Park on the Meadows on the Parkway.
Parkway Meadows on the Parkway. So go. This listing is what you need to do to get things sold. It is priced correctly. It is beautifully staged. Hamish has killed it with the videography and the photography. The owners killed it in their work that they put in to get it ready for sale, and we're about ready to hit the go button on it today. The final thing we need to dial in is pricing, and we've looked at all the comparables. We've talked extensively about market conditions. We think we have this positioned right. So who is this property for? It's the ideal archetype is something we talk a lot about with our sellers and internally when we look at property that we're preparing to market for sale. And the ideal archetype for this property could be a young professional. It could also be a downsizing individual or couple. It could also be a student. And in our marketing, I drew a distinction between the party side of the city and the serious side of the city when it comes to student properties. And this one, if it's a student, this is for serious students. This is far away from the hill where the party zone is. You're not going to have to worry about red cups in the trash bin because you're not next to Greek life. And you're still minutes away from campus. So this is the kind of property my parents would have said, this is okay for you to live here. But if I tried to live anywhere on the hill, they would have said, oh, hell no. Look at
absolutely
you see those parties of kids that are playing, beer pong. You're not going to live anywhere near those people.
Yeah.
We want you
put
studying
you in North Boulder.
at school.
Yeah.
Right, you're lucky you're not in North Boulder. East Boulder is a great spot, close to open space, close to all that shopping, close to a library, and minutes from campus, and a really functional layout, the classic townhome layout. And I believe it'll be priced aggressively. So let's see when it hits the market. It should happen later today. It's coming soon. Will be available by the time you hear this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're doing an open house too, right, this weekend?
I'm going to do an open house this weekend, 10 to noon on Saturday. That's
and
right.
I'll be doing an open house at our other listing, 4585 13th Street, 1C, from 11:30 to 1:30.
Okay, excellent. I thought you were also doing 10 to noon. Oh, you changed your time. You need to sleep in a little on Saturday morning.
Had to chat with my friends and figure out the plan. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Cool.
So let's move into a segment. Let's move into a segment called Sales of the Week. This is when we talk about lessons from recent closings. And I feel that this is really important to help educate you on what's happening in the market. If you're a buyer or a seller, we would do something similar, specific to your price range and location and specific to the property type you're trying to sell if you're a seller. And we find that this is super helpful. It's also really helpful to see these properties in person. And many of these we have seen, but we're going to rip through them pretty quick. 2962 Shadow Creek, Unit 105 is our first sale of the week. It had been on the market 71 days, and the last list price was $515. It closed at $500 with no concessions that are disclosed. Cash deal, 2-bedroom, 1-bath at Gold Run. Over the years, I've helped many clients buy and sell at Gold Run. It is a location that is really close to CU, and it's also really close to the 29th Street Shopping Mall. It's sort of centrally Boulder. It's right on the bike path that people really like, that it's right on the bike path. And this particular unit had a 1-car space in the underground parking garage. And it still took a long time to get it sold. Well, let me back up. So it was originally listed at $527.5 in August. And mid-August, as I've mentioned many times, is not a great time to list a home. And by the end of November, they cut the price to $520, and then that listing expired at the end of the year without going under contract. They brought it back at $525 this March, and they cut it to $515 in April, and then it finally sold at $500. So, this is a pretty good location, and you also get a health club benefits, but you also, in terms of the association dues, that's one of the things you get is a really nice health club. And those amenities should be looked at pretty carefully if you're thinking about buying a condo like this in Boulder. $613 a month is a little bit painful until you realize all that you're getting. And the garage is accessible via elevator. Not all units have garages, by the way. So Gold Run...
Not all Gold Run units, right?
Right. Not all Gold Run units have garages or the elevator access. And so when you're evaluating Gold Run in particular, you need to determine whether this is a newer sprinkled building with garage access, and what's the layout, and also what floor are you on. So the top floor units sell for more money, the mid-level units sell for a little less, and the ground floor units sell for typically the lowest dollar amount. You're going to say, you've been there, there so many times. Yeah.
We know Gold Run so well. If you have any questions about Gold Run, call us. We love this complex, and we know... like you were saying, some buildings are sprinklered, some buildings have garage access. Here are your benefits. Here's how it runs. And we sold a I'm forgetting, it's Gold Run, not Gold Hill. Gold Run property last year, and that was one of our favorites, and it was sad to see it go from our sellers. But I really like that area too.
Yeah, it's great. That's the Gold Run unit, and it's probably, this is the similar target price zone of our new listing on Osage. Key distinction between Gold Run and our new listing is that this particular property has a lot of student density, and Osage does not. So you're far less likely to have student neighbors if you live at 4800 Osage than if you live at 2962 Shadow Creek at Gold Run.
And I'd also say you're in a slightly better, fairly better location as far as getting out of Boulder. If you need to shoot to, anywhere outside of Boulder, you're right there. Right. Access to the highway is fairly convenient. If
you're trying to get downtown, it's going to take you a little longer from Osage. But if you're trying to get to public transit or get to the airport or get to the grocery store. It's a better
Costco.
grocery, frankly. The one at Costco. The one that Gold Run is close to is probably the most rundown grocery store in Boulder. The one that's at 28th and Arapahoe is rough compared to any of the other grocery stores. There's no comparison, Hamish.
I think it's because I've never been there that I agree with you.
It's sketchy as a grocery store. The stories online are all over the place. And if I have a choice, I will drive to any of the other grocery stores before I go to that one because of how unpleasant the experience can be in that grocery. So it's not just that there's a grocery close by, it's a nicer grocery at 4800 Osage. All right, let's move on to our next property. 301 29th Street in Boulder in Martin Acres. It's listed as subdivision Highland Park, but that's really Martin Acres. And this property it started life likely as a 3-bed, 1-bath, and they added on some square footage, likely converted the garage into living space. At some point in time, unclear if it was a permitted conversion. That's always something to check. But this particular property, it's really close to campus, and they did some very attractive updates in this house. If you look at the photos, you see a completely remodeled kitchen, and the work quality looks pretty nice. It does not look flippery, as I like to call it. There is still a workshop gear storage room, 300 square feet. It is attached. So you do still have some gear storage. So pretty nice house all in. Only a 1-bath though, 4-bed, 1-bath. And so that kind of makes it a unicorn in the Martin Acres market. When you do this type of conversion, you usually have at least a 2nd bath. But in any event, that didn't stop the market from jumping all over it. It was listed in May, and at $899, it was under contract within 5 days, which means it could have been under contract at day 2 because you have 3 business days to change the status. And the day after that, it went to pending. They wouldn't even allow any more showings, and it sold for $56,000 over the list price. So bidding war, sold for $56,000 over the list price, but with a conventional conventional mortgage. It's not clear if it's fixed rate, and there was $10,000 in concessions. Unclear what that was for. So it just says concessions towards closing costs, but it could easily have been an inspection issue that came up later, and that's typically how those things are resolved, right or wrong. So very, very nice deal for the seller, very fast sale for the listing agent and the seller, and a lovely house for the buyer, provided they can live with no proper garage, and only 1 bath.
Yeah. It looks so similar to another property that I showed that I just searched my emails to see if it was. It wasn't. What do you think of that flat roof between the two kind of traditional roofs?
It's probably okay. I don't think it's completely flat. I think it actually has some pitch.
Yeah.
This photo makes
it's just weird, right?
Maybe it is flat. It's flat roofs. People are always scared of flat roofs for some reason. They could leak if they're badly installed or not maintained. Yeah. But there are a lot of flat roofs around, and if they're properly maintained and installed, they're not a big deal.
Visually unusual for, your traditional home. Yeah. But pretty cool.
There are some very small houses on 28th, 29th, and 27th Streets that are some of, I believe, the earliest houses built in Martin Acres, some of them, and they are smaller than your typical 3-1. They could be 850 square feet. And this looks like it started off life really small, and they added to it with a substantial addition.
Yeah. Substantial and needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our third sale of the week, 516 Valley View Drive. And this is a home in Newlands that I happened to look at least 3 times with different buyers during the listing period. So I saw it quite a bit, not far away from our listing last year on Alpine. And Valley View is a very quiet street, unlikely to get much traffic at all, so we'll give that to it as a plus. But the orientation of this property on the lot resulted in a very tiny, a small backyard, right? It's on the inside of a corner, and so the backyard feels very pie-shaped toward the point, and it also means that the neighbors on all the sides around it felt like they were peering into this tiny wedge-shaped backyard. So there's strike one. Strike two was every aspect of the house felt like it had a bad case of the angles. Like you'd walk in and somebody spent a lot of money at some point in time, probably in the 90s, if I had to guess, remodeling this in a way that was architecturally unique and interesting, but the decisions they made resulted in some really awkward spaces and some weird angles.
And you're saying in many ways from seeing it in person, right? Not just off in the person, because these photos are also.
Yeah, the photos are pretty.
Well, no, they're struggling with angles like that.
Yeah, you see the angles as a photographer. My clients mostly did not see how weird and wide-angle-y these photos are. But virtually every room was not a square. And so...
Frank Lloyd Wright, baby.
And then there's that metal thing in the back that was very unusual too, the trellis-looking thing that I think was set up as a shade anchor over the patio. So very strange house. And then I think really what hurt it the most, despite the funkiness, right? Because people can look past funky, especially if they're downsizing or it's not their first home. It might be a second home to live in Boulder. What hurt it is the color scheme. Like that pink and blue was kind of makes you feel a little ill.
It's outdated. It does make you feel ill.
Yeah. And I'm going to say one more thing. Let me see who the listing agent is before I throw them under the bus. Okay, somebody I don't know with a brokerage in Superior. So at my first showing, the back door was wide open, and like the back patio door, and I looked at it and I'm like, this isn't going to properly latch. Like it's missing the pins on one side, and so anytime the wind blows, this is going to open the door. And I messaged the listing agent, and they never even responded.
Nice.
I was really just floored by that. I was like, okay, like, don't care was the message I kind of got after not hearing any response from reaching out to them. So, but I took multiple buyers through, and none of them could look past all the weird angles and then the tiny backyard. And they could get past the weird color because you could fix the color with a better paint scheme, but you couldn't get past the weirdness of the house. And so what happened with the listing? Well, they originally listed it at 1.745, so that's $1,745,000 in September 23, and they took it off the market at the end of the year. Nothing happened that year. It wasn't on the market in 24, but then they listed it in April of this year at 1.575, and it eventually went under contract and sold for 1.45, so $125,000 below the last list price, and a $2,500 concession for unknown reasons at the finish line.
I could imagine there's something there. This home, while it looks nice, also for some reason, do you sometimes see homes and you're like, I bet this has something weird with it, like inspection related?
Not, I mean, I sometimes see the photos online. No, I mean, I do sometimes see photos online, and I'm like, oh, there's some stuff going on here.
Yeah.
And I assume it's going to look worse than it does in the photos, and usually that's true. But the photos never really show you the problems. That's why we look at homes in person. Even when our clients aren't available to see them, we go without them to take a look. Okay, let's move on to our next one, because we have two more to go.
Yep.
And then we have the news, and then we have Carveouts, and we are trying to wrap this up pretty quickly. Yeah, so we can go a little over.
Okay.
3953 Springleaf Lane is our next sale of the week. It closed on May 30th for 1.784, so that's $1,784,000. Pretty new house, built in 2014, and in very, very close proximity to the Lucky's shopping empire in North Boulder. House, on paper, it all looks like it makes sense. 3,500 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 5 baths, smallish lot, 4,000 square foot lot, not atypical for newer build. Yet the property really struggled, and I also showed this one to multiple buyers. Let's talk about what they bought it for. So these people originally acquired the home for $1,168,000 in 2014. So that's 11 years ago. And they didn't lose money because they held it long enough. But the problems with the house were that it had no yard. And it was also very dark and very customized to the seller in a way that was artistically interesting, but somewhat off-putting for every buyer I took through it. In fact, I warned my buyers that you're probably not going to like this one, but let's go look if you really want to go see it. Because the photos did a good job. It did look pretty compelling from the pictures. Nice professional landscaping in the second photo or third photo. You see the foothills behind it. Of course, they had fall photos because of how long it had been on the market. But what you don't see is how close Broadway is, and what you don't see is how little separation there is from a busy road. And so that was something that my clients had a hard time getting past. And ultimately, I think the market responded in a way that reflected reflected the limited appeal of this house. So they started at 2.2 and 23, and they dropped it to 2.1 by July of 23, and they pulled it off at the end of August. They brought it back in 2024 in March at 2.15, and they chased the market down all last year until they got to just below 2 million in September, and then they pulled it off again. And then this January, they brought it back at 2 million, so effectively the same price. And then the market struggled with it. It went under contract once, twice this year. It was under contract twice, and then the listing expired, and it was brought back one more time, and this time at a $55,000 discount at the end of March. And at the end of April, they cut it a month later to 1.9. And then at the end of April, they finally went under contract, and it sold for 1,784, so 1,784,000. Pretty big discount, right? You're talking about 116,000 from the last list price. And mostly it's because of the issues that have nothing to do with the house itself, but with the location and the lot. And gorgeous in some ways, really. The customizations. I mean, there was also some sign of deferred maintenance. I remember looking up at the solar panel. If you look at some of the photos, you'll see solar panels covering a patio. Well, the underside of that looked like it was starting to show some rot from water damage. Like it just wasn't being taken care of, and that didn't help the attractiveness of the house when you notice things are being that deferred maintenance is starting to pile up.
Yeah, definitely. And no, that's a good point. You start to say things like that. You say, well, I wonder what's not visible that's being ignored.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, our last one, and this is like the opposite side of the scale of attractiveness. 6685 Baseline Road, built in 2019, and absolutely beautiful and stunning. The listing agent, who we know, Patrick Brown, did a fantastic job in marketing this house. It truly, the photos look spectacular. It's dialed in. It's 95% the house, of course. Agents do their best to get things sold, but all of it looks so spectacular in its design, in its conception, how it flows, how it functions. But that doesn't stop Mr. Market, right? And of course, views. The problem with the house was that the market above 3 was completely and painfully saturated. So they originally listed it in 2024 in a market that was falling, and it did not sell. So from March to August, it was on the market. They did try to drop it below 3, but did not find a buyer. And then in April of this year, brought it back just under 3. And after about a week, it was under contract, and it sold for about $50,000 below list, which is sort of a typical type discount. The biggest appealing thing about this location is Baseline Reservoir. I hope the owners know that there's a multi-year waiting list to belong to the club that gets to recreate. Like, you can recreate at the Baseline Lake Swim Club, but you have an opportunity. If you look at the listing description, this is very clever. You have an opportunity for a membership at the Baseline Lake Swim Club, but you should expect that opportunity to take a couple of years for it to come to fruition. Home built in 2019, kind of trivial concession on the closing, and conventional fixed rate mortgage for the deal. So I think this is a great acquisition. You're very close to Boulder proper. You've got spectacular views. Someday you might get to dip your toes in the reservoir, and you've got a really nice and attractive home with a 3-car detached garage. That, I don't know, maybe that's just what's really capturing my attention, is that gorgeous garage. But awesome house, and needed to be below 3, really, because the above 3 market is even more competitive. There's so much inventory and so little under contract right now.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty one. What is it? It's a hobby barn dominium.
I mean, I think that's like the garage mahal, right? The house is the garage is almost the same size as the house.
No kidding.
The pool is pretty nice. The landscaping looks horrible and dried and crusty and depressing.
I'm going to give them grace and say that it's because it's a new build, right?
It's not a new build. It's a 2019.
Oh, okay. Then no excuse.
They have no excuse for $3 million for landscaping to look like that. They have no excuse, right? That's just really, really sad landscaping, but we'll blame the owners for that. The former owners, because the new owners, I doubt, are going to let it look like that for long.
Yeah.
But great house. Yeah, really nice living spaces, classic design, and awesome location.
Totally. Well, news, eh?
Okay, we're only going to talk about one item in the news today, and that is a new discovery to us as people evaluate Trump's big, beautiful tax bill. And this is in Section 889. We've given you a link to an article from a law firm that really goes into it. What we feel like you should know is that this is a potential political weapon that is being aimed at those that may be opposed to the policies of the current administration. And by that I mean, boy, this is a tricky topic to talk about. So what's in here is the ability for the administration to arbitrarily impose higher U.S. tax rates on foreign individuals, companies, and governments from countries that the U.S. deems, quote, unfair foreign taxes. So basically they would determine that they're going to tax you at a higher rate. And taxing foreign investors in the United States at higher rates, I don't think has existed in my lifetime, and is a sea change, because a lot of people that acquire hard assets in the United States are from foreign countries. So taxing them at a higher rate punitively punishes those people, but also increases revenue to the U.S. government. And using it arbitrarily by the administration could be a political weapon. What's the potential impact on U.S. housing is the question. And I feel like locations that have a high percentage of foreign investment, and those are known, are much more susceptible. Here in Boulder, I don't think our foreign investment in housing is that high. If I had to guess, it would be under 10%. In fact, I might say it's even under 5%, but that's anecdotal based on my client base. I was going to say,
same here anecdotally, yeah.
Right? We certainly attract our fair share of foreign buyers and have represented them multiple times, but it's a small fraction of our client base. I just don't think it will be that material, but there will be some markets for which it will be. And I particularly think the West Coast markets. The Pacific Northwest is known. Seattle is known for having a huge percentage of foreign investment from China and other countries in the East. So keep an eye on this little bomb that's sitting in the big, beautiful tax bill that no one's read. That one, I think, will have an impact on certain markets.
Yeah. I don't think it's 100% similar, but I think it's right. When there's dissent or the admin doesn't like what's going on, they can kind of enact this and increase tax rates. It kind of reminds me, Amazon released that they were going to include in their pricing structure what percentage of the price or what the direct price was from the tariffs. And then they got called by the Trump admin and said that they never even had that idea and they're not doing it anymore. I wonder if this is going to be kind of used similarly to anything that comes out, or, it's, yeah, we'll see.
Well, I suppose it's people in our political environment are also self-interested. Like, it would be wrong to assume that U.S. politicians are less self-interested than, say, Chinese politicians. Yeah. However, I think it would be correct to assume that a lot of wealthy Communist Party members have foreign investment in the United States among many other countries. And hitting them financially might be the same as or similar to hitting, say, Russian oligarchs to try to sway the course of the Ukraine-Russia war by hitting them in their pockets, seizing their yachts, right? I think that's similar. That's probably that would be the most positive spin I can put on this. Other than I feel like it could also be really misused to benefit administration insiders disproportionately to their own wealth gain. And if they're gonna leverage the tax code to benefit the United States in whole, what stops them from leveraging the tax code on foreign individuals to benefit themselves as a threat? Like either you invest in this new venture I have in the Middle East with me, you put a $500 million investment in, or you might find that you're getting taxed at 40% on all of your U.S. investments when you try to extract that capital. You try to sell your assets, your stocks, you liquidate your investments in the U.S. companies. We're going to hit you with a 40% cap gains rate. And you can't do anything about it because all these assets are in U.S. markets. We control the U.S. markets. And you're screwed. Well, or you could put $500 million up today, and we'll make sure your name is excluded from the list of individuals that we're particularly targeting. Like, I could see that sort of shenanigan happening.
Buy some of my crypto coin, and we'll call it good,
Right. Buy a lot of my crypto and hold it for 3 years. And we'll just, your name might just fall off this list of people we're going to target. Yeah.
Making friends.
A little sketchy, particularly given, this is one of the reasons you're supposed to have public record of all communication by public officials. And why it's deeply concerning that certain individuals are using Signal and other methods to obscure their private communications, that when they're in office are supposed to be public communications, or at least recorded so that we can review it later.
FOIA, right? FOIA.
Right. FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, should be able to bring those things to light eventually. And if they're in an encrypted,
peer-to-peer,
non-public, but that's also naive to think that politicians prior to Signal weren't doing things that benefited themselves financially, right? Like, you've often seen politicians whose wives or husbands have found themselves suddenly getting 100%. Extremely wealthy, right? By suspiciously wealthy out of nowhere.
There's a whole bunch of investor groups too that just follow the trades of Congress, like, what was I gonna say? Oh, it's gone now, but maybe we don't need FOIA, and we'll just see more journalists getting tagged into groups that they weren't meant to be in, and then we just get our news from that.
Maybe. I like it, Hamish. Touche.
But no, I hear you and agree.
Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Should we talk about carve-outs and wrap up this pod?
Yeah. Do you want to hit it? I'm very curious about your sailing trip. I'm giving away. I buried the lead. I kind of want you to go. You did. Well, it's not a trip. All right, I'll go first. I wanted you to go first, but I will go first. I feel like I've done way too much talking as usual. Okay, so obviously sailing, maybe it's not obvious to you, dear listeners, but I've gotten into sailing, and of course living in Boulder and sailing as a hobby is sort of not a great combo, you would think. But it turns out we have this great organization called Community Sailing right here in Boulder, and they offer classes. And to brush up my skill set, I signed up for a class this month, and my wife and I are taking that class. She's doing the intro level, I'm doing the intermediate. And yesterday was our first class. We got out on the Boulder Reservoir. Despite it being 50 degrees, the water was warmer than the air. And we were in these boats that are dinghies, that are inflatable dinghies, and you're right on the water. So my sailing partner got me very wet by hopping off the boat the wrong way. What are you going to do? Like, punch the guy? Like, mistakes happen. But when he got off, he stood on my side of the boat, which immediately dunked my butt into the water. And I was like, oh, and then I got to get out in the freezing 50-degree air. It was a very cold end to sailing and very, very light wind, but so much fun and such a great community organization. You've got two people on that little boat?
On that dinghy. Yeah. There's, I did put the story on my Instagram. with some classic sailing music in the background. And at some point in my professional career, I likely will be spending more time on a sailboat in places probably not in the Boulder Res and probably bigger boats. And that's a future plan for a future day. But I was super excited to be on the water yesterday and not be staring at my phone and not be thinking about anything other than which way is the wind blowing. And how do we adjust and trim these sails and rudder to get the vector we want between the rudder and the sails and the dagger board to direct us where we want to go? It's just beautiful physics and really lovely. And there's no motor, there's no carbon emissions from a sailboat of that size, of a dinghy sailboat. That's just so nice. Oh, so nice.
I was gonna say you probably don't even hear like the lapping of the water on that thing. It looks so calm, but like that's one of my favorite things is when you're out in the middle and it's pure peaceful, and you're solely wind powered. You've got that like self-sufficiency feeling to it.
Yeah,
really so cool. Yeah. I might have to join you, unless there's a massive wait list. I could see that, but
you need to sign up in advance. But it does sell out. But for sure, check out and there are also classes in Denver. Okay. So for sure, check out Community Sailing. Yeah. And Hamish, tell me all about your track day this past weekend.
Yeah, last week I talked about track prep, and last weekend I went to the track, so it was really cool. I've been to High Plains Raceway, which is out in Deer Trail, and they do customer appreciation days where you come out and it's relatively affordable to just infinite laps and dial in your car. It's kind of a test and tune thing. Pikes Peak International Raceway down in Fountain was doing that, so I went down. Off the bat, I recommend High Plains. Pikes Peak was really cool. Their track is a little bit slower, tighter corners. It's within the oval of like a NASCAR type track. NASCAR oval, so there's just really not that much room, and they were doing it. I actually appreciated it. It was 1 by 1, so you waited about 20 seconds for the car in front of you to get halfway through, 3/4 of the way through the track, and then you were able to go. And had a lot of fun. I'm going off of what the guy told me, and it's not much of a gloat, but I'm feeling pretty good. This is a car that I built, that's not like a factory good one or anything. But the faster times, apparently, like the fastest cars were all getting a variation of like 68 seconds. The absolute fastest car got 66. And then the last time that I posted was 71.426, I believe. So I was really stoked with that, and I'm pretty sure I can get into the 60s. I tell you, I was gliding. I wasn't drifting, but I was right up to the grip limit of my tires, where you kind of start to slide more than you drift or kick out or anything. And you're kind of like working the wheel as much as you can to get whatever bit of grip you have. And my head was sideways because I'm trying to like counteract the G-force. So it was a lot of fun. The first time that I got when I was there was like 81.9 seconds. So a good 10-second reduction. I'll take it any day. The car did really well. It got a little bit warm. I'm blaming the queue because it was 1 by 1 and there were so many cars. You probably waited in line for about 10 minutes for a less than 2 minute time at the track. But I think I'll put like a spray bar on the radiator so I can just get some evaporative cooling on it. It just won't be all the time, because it stays fine city and street. And then maybe an oil cooler because it did get pretty clickety clackety on startup before I left for the day. But High Plains,
the oil had thinned and the lifters were clicking. Hydraulic lifters were making noise.
100%. That's what it was, and it sounded. If you guys know these old BMW V8s, some of them have Vanos, and you start it up and it sounds like you're rolling marbles or shaking them in a cardboard box. Kind of has that noise, and you hear that, and you're like, "Oh God, this engine's about to go like kaput." But it cooled down pretty quick, and it sounded good.
Is that just a timing chain tensioner that's making that, or?
It depends. I mean, it really depends. That engine is super privy to a lot of like timing chain type failures. So like it's got a plastic U guide that disintegrates, and then it eats like metal I don't have those issues on mine. I built it so I wouldn't. But those engines make certain noises that just really you want to crawl inside and die. Like, it's bad. So probably an oil cooler in the future. Final takeaway though, high plains I think is a lot cooler for more so you can get more laps in, and also you can take cool down laps. You're never lining up, everybody's on the track at the same time, so if you want to go slower you just go to the outside of the corners or whatever, and just take it easy, and people going through and pass you. So yeah,
I mean, I've never been on the track, but when I was in college I had a Volkswagen, a minty green Volkswagen Golf. And I had installed Eibach springs on it and put on aftermarket wheels and tires that were low profile. And those Eibach springs had dropped the ride height by like 1.5 inches or 2 inches. And this wasn't a tall car to begin with. And it cornered so flat. It was like a go-kart. And then on certain corners, like on-ramps, it would drift.
Yep.
Without any warning, it would suddenly start going sideways, and I was like, okay, like no tire squeal. It would just suddenly
it's like a silent
slide.
Yeah.
And I remember loving those on-ramps, but also realizing that even though that car was horribly underpowered, it could easily end up, like, body roll serves as a warning that something bad's about to happen.
And it can aid in grip too. Yeah.
In some cases. And too stiff. I don't know if it was I loved it. At my age now, I probably would not love it, but at that age, it was such a fun car.
Yeah.
Plus, it was so useful, that hatchback design.
Dude, you have to come to the track with me one day.
All right.
That would be so much fun. We have, you've got a car that can do it. I'm by no means an expert. I don't know Apexes worth a damn. I'm just kind of feeling my way through it. So,
would they let somebody in with a convertible? Don't you need? They're okay with convertibles?
Should be okay on that. Yeah, I know Miata made it to PPIR last week or the week before I was there. They did spin out and hit the wall with their head and left on a stretcher, but
oh my,
we'll go to high plains. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That sounds great. Love it. Love to do it. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with a little bit of appreciation for our audience. If you are still listening or watching this podcast, please accept our deepest gratitude for you. We appreciate your attention. We appreciate your comments. We read them. We discuss them. And we also appreciate our clients that have come from this podcast. Mm-hmm. If you'd like to learn more about the House Einstein brokerage, you can visit our website at houseeinstein.com. We have a newsletter there as well that is slated to come out quarterly. You can also leave us feedback on any of our channels. You'll find us at YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky. Occasionally, I'll also post to my LinkedIn. And anything else to add, Hamish?
Not really. Yes. It's Friday when you're listening to this, at least, which means 4800 Osage Drive is up and running. If you're listening to this and you like what we do, head over there, give it a view, give it a like, leave a comment, give some engagement, get that video going. And if you're interested too, reach out. Yeah. Yeah.
Come check out our open house too, Saturday. I'll be there 10 to noon.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.